who knows? Anything in the future is possible.
That we begin to think of ourselves as members of the human race on planet Earth.
The thing about governments, though, most governments, is that priority number one is to stay in power.
Their eyes are extremely large.
Take a close look at the world's fastest airplane.
One of them, they haven't found it yet, could be headed this way at 40,000 miles an hour.
There are other projects on the Giza Plateau. Coming this September, a Queen's Pyramid will be opened for the first time. And the plateau continues to yield surprises.
Several times we have tried to establish contact with Earth humans, but usually those selected were not willing. They were afraid others would consider them liars, or mad, or would try to destroy them.
It's one of these lucky or unlucky people, depending on your point of view, who's had a rather remarkable experience. Imagine driving from point A to point B on a trip which normally takes 2 or 3 hours, and finding when you've arrived that over 10 days have gone. Well, this is, I guess, the beginning of Alec's story. I won't go into too much detail because I'd like you to hear it from his own lips. Alec's only ever spoken once before about this to a small group, so he's sort of come forward with no designs for glamour, fame or fortune. In fact, if anything, we've sort of gently had to encourage him to come forward, and we've given him some information for him to research and back up some of the aspects of his experience. So please give him a warm welcome. He's come all the way from New Zealand. We had some trouble getting him over here through the government. They certainly are showing a lot of interest in Alec and his story, and I'm sure if you want to ask some questions on that at the end, he'll be open to talking. So give him a warm welcome for Alec Newald. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. Yes, well, I hope there's a room full of nervous people here, because I wouldn't want to be on my own. I'll stand up on here. This is terrible. You should try interacting with Ali sometime. It's a lot easier than this, I can assure you. Okay. Now, a lot of you people have probably come here to presumably to hear a story that took 10 days to unfold, and I wish it was that simple. It's actually a 7-year scenario. Partially my own understanding and enlightenment has taken 7 years, but some negative forces on this planet decided that what I'd been through was not for public consumption, and that then entailed a 7-year lesson, I suppose, to deal with them, and then to advance myself. This is a spiritual advancement, if you like, or just an understanding of nature. Very difficult to know where to start. I'll take you back to February of 1989, which is when this interaction occurred, and then I'll progress through as I understood it to unfold, which won't be in a linear progression, because I didn't realise that I'd had 10 days of missing time until several days had elapsed, and then it took me really a couple of years to sort out the exact sequence. So it'll be easy for you to understand if I just take it back as it unfolded for me. So we go back to February of 1989, and I was living in Rotorua, which is a small tourist town to the south of Auckland, the main city in the North Island of New Zealand. And it was a pretty dramatic time for me. I'd been married for 15 years, and my marriage was just about to fall apart at that stage. And I think the only reason I mention that is because I think the situation that I was in, stress, trauma, whatever you like, may be something to do with my connection with whatever it is that I interacted with. Because since we've gone through some hypnotherapy at a later date, I found that during my childhood, this has been going on all my life pretty much, this interaction. And whenever there was a stress in my life, this is when I seemed to be able to connect with these people. Whether they were monitoring me and sort of educating me and getting me through the difficult spots, I really wouldn't like to speculate on, but that there is a connection between my emotions and my connection with whoever these people are. So if you keep that in mind, that I was really quite stressed at the time this interaction occurred. Whether I'm holding this at the right distance. Everybody here okay? Great. So I was actually leaving the family unit in mid-February 1989 when and driving to Auckland to stay with some friends. Now, coincidentally, that was the first time in my entire life probably I could have disappeared for 10 days and nobody was really keeping a check on me. I was sort of in limbo between one aspect of my life and another. And I don't think during the whole duration of my life could I ever have gone missing for 10 days and nobody would have noticed. So I think it might pay to consider that the people that I interacted with, the alien intelligence, are time travellers. And if you put that into perspective, maybe they had already known where I would be at a set date and were waiting for me. And that was the best time to uplift me and start this scenario. That's something I've only just come to grips with quite recently in dealing with thinking about why it should have happened and how they would have picked that particular time. That may be an aspect of it, but we won't dwell on that too long. We've got a long way to go. It's 7 years of my life, and if I don't fit most of it in, you won't realise what's been happening quite recently as well, which culminated in difficulty even getting here. So I'll just skip over the first initial bit because it just involves driving from Auckland to Rotorua and then finding that we had a few days to sort out. At first initially, you might think this is sort of blasé, but I thought I'd lost 2 days or 3 days. I'd originally left Rotorua on a Monday, and when I sorted out what was happening in Auckland, I think it was a Thursday, and I couldn't quite figure out what had happened to the Monday and the Tuesday and the Wednesday. It was only sort of a week later I realised there was another week before that missing as well, so it was fairly dramatic. I was into March really before I realised that I hadn't had the last 2 weeks of February. That was really put that down to, I was pretty stressed out. It was a pretty disastrous time in my life. You don't get married and live with one partner for 15 years and dispense with that relationship and just brush it over. I'm not like that, so I really wasn't very interested in a lot of stuff going on around me, except that there were some pretty weird things happening, I can tell you. You might notice I'm not wearing a watch after our first couple of speech talks. They don't like me very much. I've got a drawer full of watches at home actually, and I thought there was something wrong with them until I figured out there was something wrong with me. Batteries just last about 3 or 4 weeks and they go flat, and you take them back to get the watch fixed, and it costs more to have it fixed and to buy another battery, so you put another battery and it goes flat in a month, so you throw the watch away. And I did that 3 times, and now I've got like 3 or 4 watches at home if anybody's interested. So I just don't wear them anymore. They are battery operated watches. I must admit I've never thought about going to an ordinary timepiece, but I just got used to not bothering with them. I've had to borrow one here actually to give me a check on the time. Okay, now, so that was just one of the odd things that happened. I couldn't tell left from right, which is also rather strange. It was like I was a negative photograph of myself, if you want to put it bluntly. I was driving around Auckland, which I've been in for 40 years previously to moving to Rotorua, and I was getting lost in the streets. I was turning right when I should have been left, and I was halfway down the road before I realised I'd do a U-turn and go all the way back and through the intersection the other direction. So this is, it's pretty worrying at the time. You think, I'm losing it here. This is something pretty strange. Several other things, but I won't dwell on them now. The biggest single feature probably was the car. It literally fell apart on me. The car had been driving up to Auckland and from Rotorua. Hydraulically, all the seals started to leak about the same time. I'd replace one, another one would go, I'd replace that, another one would go. And it was just an ongoing procession of mechanical repairs. The electronic injection system on it, that went sort of haywire on the way up to Rotorua, because I I just thought it had malfunctioned on the way. I didn't realise that they had a 10-day trip somewhere else in the meantime. So I know one thing, alien technology doesn't like terrestrial cars, or they don't understand very much about them. And being a mechanic myself, I was sort of, you know, what was going wrong with it just was illogical. I'll get to another very peculiar thing that happened to the car a little later, because that was really what put some terrestrial agencies on my doorstep, I believe, and caused me the strife I've had ever since. Basically what ended up, and because I was, like, I didn't have a place to live, I was flatting with some friends, and my car was playing up, and I couldn't get out to look at places to rent, and that's why I just sold it in the end. I just got sick of trying to fix it. And I just bought something cheap and moved to another flat. And I was probably there for about a week, maybe 2 weeks. And I had a knock on the door from two mysterious gentlemen that suggested they were from the DSIR, which is the Department of Scientific and Industrial Research in New Zealand. It's an establishment that doesn't exist now, conveniently, but it has been dissolved and broken up into several other government units. These gentlemen said they were from the DSIR, but they really acted more like policemen than scientists, although they did have a lot of questions for me. Evidently, for some reason, they had got hold of my car that I'd sold, whether it was presented to them because the local garage couldn't figure out what was wrong with it, I don't know, but there was a lot of ongoing problems with that car, and they quizzed me on all sorts of things, like had it been an accident concerning like high-tension power lines, or had it been any arc welding done on it, etc., etc. Anything to do with electricity, they were quite keen, and I couldn't give them an answer. There was nothing that the car had been involved in that I was sure of. By now, though, this problem with lefts and rights and the watches going flat and several other things that I can't remember now because I'm too nervous. Anyway, they gave me a really a third degree. It was it was a real grilling. And this was from scientific folk that were supposed to only be interested in the car, and they seemed to want to know more about me. The surprising thing was that I felt I had changed, because I was sort of repelled by these guys, and I couldn't quite understand that. It was like I could see right through them. Their presentation seemed false. It was almost like I was reading their minds as they were talking to me. Rather a strange sensation, because up until then I'd been reasonably trusting with people, and I'd take people on face value. If they said there was something, I would believe them until proven different. But these guys didn't add up. There was nothing about them that felt good, and I quite honestly panicked. And in the back of my mind was the thought they're going to present me with this car and ask me to buy it back, and I'd already spent some of the money. So I wasn't financially well off at that stage. Like, I wasn't working, and with the marriage separation going through, I didn't have a lot of excess money, so I'd already spent half it on another car, and the scenario of buying it back wasn't going to work, so I just actually opted out. I said, I'm going to move. So I'd only been in the flat a couple of weeks, and I just upped stakes and moved to another dwelling, mainly to put them off my track and just to start afresh. I didn't like the way that where they were coming from. That was okay. I didn't leave any forwarding address. I only told a few close friends what my new address would be, and within 2 weeks the same two guys turned up on the doorstep again and really threw me for a loop, because there was no way they could have known where I'd moved using normal processes. That really freaked me out, and they weren't quite so friendly this time. I think they probably sussed that I'd cottoned on that they weren't DSIR guys, although I wasn't completely sure. One of the gentlemen that flashed me an ID initially, and I mean, you've got to allow all this to happen rather quickly initially, and I wasn't in the best frame of mind anyway, but he had a wallet folder, and he had a DSIR logo and name tag, but on the other side it was the Royal Institute for International Affairs, which I did not know. I only found this out from Duncan about 18 months ago when I first spoke to him. I thought it was a Royal Institute, like a university or a scientific institute connected with the DSIR. But when I spoke to Duncan, he said, you realise that they're sort of like the CIA of England, or the ruling body of the sub-government in England, which surprised me, and I had no idea. So the connection is possibly back to England on that. I've since learned that they do operate pretty freely within the SIS, which is the New Zealand Secret Intelligence Service. But all this research is very recent, and only really to try and make some sense out of where these guys were coming from and why I was very cold towards them. So anyway, the second intervention wasn't very friendly, and I decided that enough was enough. I was going to move again, and this time I wasn't going to tell anybody, and I even sold my car that I had then and bought another one under somebody else's name. I used a friend's postal address. I was flatting with someone and I just used their phone, and so there was no contact with anyone that could possibly be from a government agency. There's no way they could trace me. I wasn't on electoral rolls or in phone books or anything like that. But just before I moved the second time, I'm sure the flat I was in at that stage had been broken into, and a few little notes had been taken, I think, and a few little artefacts that had appeared, which I was trying to make some sense out of, some crystals and things that I'd been left with, that just appeared in the car after that 10-day trip, and I was trying to figure out where I would have brought them. They seemed to have taken one of those, and as I said, some doodles and some hieroglyphs that I've been playing with and trying to understand. Now, so I moved for the third time. I actually moved 5 times in 5 months to keep them off my back. But as this was unfolding, I was going through some regressive, you could call them regressive dreams, repetitive dreams. Every night I would wake up about the same time with the same dream. And it actually went on for about a month. And the dream actually followed a theme, a continuous theme. It was a bit confusing at first, but when I used to wake up in the morning, I'd start writing down what I could remember. And from that, I built up quite a long and involved interaction with some very strange people that I couldn't place. Like there were no friends, they weren't friends, and they didn't fit anywhere. The actual visual image of who I was interacting with was a bit hard to sort out, but the storyline was very easy to understand because it just followed a logical sequence. And after about a month, eventually the dream stopped. And it just ended in a slightly different way with that last dream. And it was like the closing of a chapter, the closing of a story. About this stage, I was really freaking out because I really thought I had some problems. You have no idea. I even went and stayed with some friends for a while because I couldn't be on my own. It was a strange sort of a feeling that it's very difficult for you to understand. But anyway, I actually sat down one night and started putting the sequence of dreams together, and it's just like somebody started filling in the gaps for me. All the broken sequences fitted together as I wrote them. It's like somebody else was writing the sequence of events. So from that, and once I realised that there were government agencies chasing me, like I won't name them, I wouldn't say they were CIA or anything like that because they never identified themselves, so that would be pure speculation. I'm just guessing. So I actually managed to put together what happened over those 10 days, so now I'll proceed to run over that for you. We have got some slides here, but the projector's not working very well, so I'll leave that to the very end and just have to try and explain the very best I can without pictures. It's a shame because pictures 1,000 words, and I think you understand it will take me a lot longer to explain something verbally than looking at a picture. But what happened initially, I was driving, I can go back to remember driving the car, and the strange sequence was, first of all, the car started to vibrate. The whole road seemed to start shaking, actually. I couldn't tell whether it was the car or the road, or it's like the wheels were going to fall off. Then I was sort of like I was stuck in glue, if that makes any sense to you. Everything sort of slowed down and all motion was increasingly more difficult. And I was trying to control this car while this was going on, and in the end it culminated in actually freezing up behind the wheel. At that stage I was in a pretty rugged, high, hilly area out of Rotorua. It was wet, slippery, the visibility wasn't that great. It was a perfect scenario for a UFO abduction, I can assure you, because I was on the road alone, it seemed. It was the middle of the morning. I think it was a Monday morning. And I didn't see another car for quite some time, and virtually what happened is it felt like I blacked out behind the wheel, and about at that stage, the car was about to crash into a cliff. I could remember that. All I could see was this cliff face coming up and me not being able to do anything about it. And the next thing I remember after that is I was in like a cloud-type atmosphere of blue light, and I didn't at that stage appear to have a body. It was just like I was a glowing entity standing in the middle of a blue cloud. That scenario evidently took 24 hours to progress through, and I don't have full recollection of what actually happened during that process. I was told that I was going through a transformation at that stage, and I believe it was a dimensional transition to a fourth, fifth or higher dimension. I have no idea to explain it to you accurately, because I don't fully understand that myself. I was definitely being transformed into some other life form anyway. Now, about that stage, I could, after I'd been there for, well, it was 24 hours, I didn't know how long time was meaningless at that stage, I started to see some figures off in the distance, and they were just like a glowing, ghostly entities as well. At first, the problem was whether I should stay where I was or whether I should migrate towards them. I decided that discretion was a better part of valor, and I'd stay exactly where I was. But eventually they made contact with me, and then there was no word spoken at that stage, and they were only like a ghostly shadow as well. And they just wanted me to follow them. So we passed through this sort of cloud chamber, if I could describe it as that. And while I was actually there was like a ring of neon flashing lights around us. This area was quite immense, I'd say about the size of 2 football fields possibly. So there was a vast size to it, and we actually passed through that entire area, 200 metres or more, and we actually seemed to pass through this blue neon light field. I inquired later on at what that was, and it was an energy gathering device and also an anti-static device of some description. Don't ask me to fill in any more details than that. But as we passed out of that ring of light, I actually gained what I would consider to be my original body. I didn't have any clothes on, which was a bit of a fright, but didn't have the car either, obviously. And these other entities actually visibly formed bodies as well. We were just like we passed out of a cloud and we became, well, dare I say, human. Very hard to describe that sensation. There was still no communication. I hadn't been asked or ordered to do anything. It was just like a free will ride, if you like, and I was just going with my gut feeling that I should follow. There was no orders and no communication, as I said. So we passed into an area where they had like a glass tubular container, and later on I'll show you, hopefully I can show you some of the slides which might just show up. We're going to dim the lights later on, but for the cameras at the moment, we'll continue in this frame. Now, it was a glass container, and a unit came down over my head, and I don't know how long I was in there for. This was all part of a long process. And when I came out, I had what I could only call a blue Teflon bodysuit, which was actually a second skin. Now, that encompassed my whole body from head to foot, and it was like as thin as your skin, very smooth, and it was a sort of a blue-grey colour. Now, these other entities that had followed me out of the blue cloud were also, I would say, dressed or occupied the same coloured bodysuit. Probably I'll get round to what that did first to help you understand why we had it on. I was first of all informed that it was an energy transfer suit which actually gave the body sustenance. because these people didn't actually eat anything. They did partake of a liquid, but that was their only physical intake. All the rest was some electrical exchange system between the craft or their energy field or energy source and themselves, and it was some electrical processing unit which circulated between them and their power units, which actually fed them energy, nourishment actually from the atmosphere, I presume. And once again, I'm not really too conversant with the technical side of that. My education level is not high, and yet I was shown a lot of scientific things at a later date, which is going to be hard for me to convey to you because I don't fully understand why they were showing me these things. It's very difficult to understand, and it included some aspects of time travel, which I will get to in due course. So from there, and also once I had the blue suit fitted, I could actually then communicate with them, and it was a telepathic form of communication, but it didn't actually encompass the use of words. And I was informed that the suit was doing the computerized translation of this language, if you'd like to use computer terminology. Now, as I said, there's no words used. It was actually resonance combined with light and pictures at the same time. So it was 3D spectacular picture show with flashes of colour. Now the colour was translated into a language, and there's a resonance to identify the particular colours. I'll go into a little detail on that because it's interesting. There was 12 basic colours, and they split like 6 primary colours, using 6 primary colours as red, orange, yellow, green, blue and purple in mauve shade, into 2 distinct light and dark shades, and each one of those shades had a resonance, and that's how they communicated the numerical language. And the verbal language was the same, but infinitely more detailed, very difficult to explain. Each resonance actually identified what letter was what and what made up the languages. But the pictures also followed. They gave you a picture of what they were talking about, so you could understand. I don't know whether that was just for my benefit or whether that was just part of the sequence of events. But it actually became very, very easy to communicate using this sequence. It didn't seem like it was strange to me. Obviously the suit was doing its job, and I could communicate with them. Eventually I found out how to do so. And I was taken on a tour through the ship, but before that happened, I was brought to an alleyway system which looks very much like a bowling alley, your local bowling alley, and it had a sort of a central walkway through it, and off it were about 10 different alleyways. And I was told I was only really to use the end one, but there was no order to say don't use these. It was just suggested that this would be the most appropriate alleyway for me. And the escort I had at that time just left me and said, you can go in there, basically. And I was left standing agog in the middle of nowhere with an alleyway which led to what looked like a blank door. I must have stood there for quite a while, just sort of debating, well, will I go down there or will I head off somewhere else? I didn't know where I was going to escape to. It wasn't really a scary sensation. It was more a puzzlement why they would just leave me, like I should have known where I was going and what I was doing. And believe me, I didn't. So I eventually walked down this alleyway, and the wall at the end was just blank. There was no door handles, there was no obvious lights or anything on it to touch, or it didn't look like it should have opened. And I actually stood there and waited and thought, well, I'll wait for somebody to come out or somebody else to come through, and then maybe I can get in. But that went on for some time, and obviously nothing was going on. So I thought, well, I can't just stay here forever. I'll see if I can feel something around the door that would enable access. Maybe there's a hidden trigger here that I can't see. And then when I touched the door, my hand actually went right through it. That left me debating again for a while what was the next step here. Okay, so I thought, well, obviously if I was told to go through that door and my hand went through the door, the best thing to do was to try and go through the door. So I just walked through the door, and that's what happened. I walked through the door, and that was a strange sensation, I can tell you. Now, and at that point, I ended up in a huge room again. It was probably, I don't know, 80, 90 metres across, circular. All the spaces were domed, They seemed to have sort of concealed lighting, but everything was domed, everything was moulded, everything was round. There was no sharp edges to anything. It was like it was virtually grown, I would say, and I'll come to that a little bit later on with some of their other constructions, and I think grown is probably the most accurate description with my knowledge at this stage. Now, in this other room, I actually met some other human entities, some of which had been in there for quite some time, not locked in there. They were willing participants in this scenario. I didn't realise at this stage where I was going, what I was doing, what I was supposed to be doing there, or what they were going to do with me. But this was my first chance to interact with what looked to be completely human intelligences and a human life form. And the woman that first approached me explained a little bit to me. I'll have to sort of compress this story down because already we've been half an hour and we haven't even started it yet. Now, there seemed to be some sort of sequence of, I would call this an abduction, but I really don't want you to take it as an abduction. It's an interaction, but I didn't have any conscious participation in this initially. So I would have to say for me it was a surprise, so therefore it was an abduction. But later on I realised it was probably more an interaction because this had been going on for many years evidently. Now, at this time that this happened in 1989, I was 40 years of age. And surprisingly, this woman that was interacting with me said that she was also 40 years of age when she had her interaction. Now, the surprising thing was that was 1937, and she was now 90 years old, and she didn't look a day over 40. Now that can throw you a bit, I can assure you. And we had a discussion. I asked why I was there, and she said, well, you'll have to ask the hosts that. And she said there could be many reasons, and she wasn't going to guess for me. She had explained that she had been brought aboard in 1937 and had decided to stay. And I said, well, I don't want to stay. When can I get back? And she said, once again, ask your hosts. They'll be back soon, no doubt. So we were discussing philosophical state of mind and what it was like to be somewhere for 40 years and not age one day. When our alien hosts came back. Now, my first initial contact was with a female entity, two female entities actually, but one that I remember particularly because she stayed with me right through the 10 days. And I call her Xena. That's just a personal interpretation of the name, if you like, because they didn't speak English as such, and that just is a name that I've struck with that suits the personality of the person I interacted with, but I don't think I could convert her name to any English language, so I've really called a lot of these people during those 10 days just names that suit, because it's very difficult to get accurate interpretations from their language, which, as I said, does not contain any English. And I don't speak a foreign language, so there's nothing else to it. Now, this first initial alien entity was very, very, very human-like. You could say childlike, but definitely she wasn't a child. I found out that she was also about 40 years of age. I think her, if you would call it a birth date, was around about 1950, which would make her 39 years of age at that date. But she looked about 20, 18, something like that, very young anyway, and it's very difficult to get an exact fix on their age because they weren't exactly like us. I do have some slides here which I'll try and convey to you later, but you won't probably see them all that well. Now, she was about 5 feet tall, I would suggest, came up to about here. But the relevant thing here is I have no idea of scale of perception. I am just assuming I was the same size there as I am now because I appeared to have my own physical human body. But these people could have been 10 inches high or 10 feet tall. It's just my relevancy to them. So please don't take heights as literally. I mean, they might have been so small. Anyway, this previous escort, female escort, came back into the room that I was interacting with some humans, and they had with them what they called an elder or a guardian. Now, he was evidently the original base concept of what these people are now, and by that I mean they're back engineering their race, if you could call it that, if back engineering is the correct phrase, back to be more human. And as I found out later, the reason for that was they need to come back here to live, and in their present form they cannot do so. Now, they have interacted with the human race many times before, going back possibly millions of years. They were probably here long before we were, and I think along with some friends of theirs, they're responsible for our genetic involvement. Now, I won't go into too much detail there because I was told that there are many alien races that are responsible for the human race, so no one particular race can carry the can for that, if you like. We're designed by a committee, which might sort of explain a few things to you. And these people were fairly quick to inform me that they did have quite an important role in the early evolution of man, but they weren't solely and simply responsible for it. But their genetics are in us, and basically they're a very, very ancient race which I think has lived in our system for many, many millions of years and possibly came from another system before that. I learned a lot about the history of our solar system, and even though some of it might be controversial, you might find that in Duncan's magazine very, very soon you'll be getting it from other avenues, very, very similar explanations of what's going on, or what originally went on with our solar system. These people originally colonised, I believe, a planet that you might know as Maldek, and they called it or described it to me as Kyber. It is the fourth planet in our system at that stage in time, because evidently Venus wasn't there then. It would now be the fifth planet, and there's now the asteroid belt. And I think quite possibly they might have been responsible for the destruction of that planet. In early dimensional experiments, what they were doing was trying to evolve at a faster rate than nature had intended. They were quite advanced technically and very, very high intelligence, but what they were doing was playing God, and they had intended to push themselves into a fourth or fifth density dimensional reality ahead of their chosen time. And on their way to doing that, they destroyed a planet. They migrated from there, I believe, by the use of the moons of that planet, one of which was Phobos, to Mars. But in the destruction of their planet, what they've told me is that they actually destroyed the atmosphere of Mars eventually too. Those two planets interacted very, very closely at that early time. Their planet was originally basically mostly water, I believe. In various other scenarios I've heard, thanks to Duncan in the last couple of weeks, that it might well have been Earth that was this further off ice planet. And Earth had been moved in its orbit quite recently in terms of the solar system. So there's a slight confusion, but the material coming through from Duncan, which fits so well with mine, really, if you just remove a few dots of the I's and a few crossings of the T's, tells the same story. So, and I'd never heard of Alex Collier before, and he's an American abductee or interactee, or call it what you like, and evidently the information he's been given is very, very similar. For some quite exciting stuff, and I think you'll be reading about Nexus over the next few months, and I'd advise you to watch out for it. I think some very, very good information there, basically similar to what I'll be telling you now. Now, these people made their way from Mars when its atmosphere packed it in, so to speak. I think they went underground for a while, and they may still be on Mars in small numbers in an underground installation. And I believe they migrated to what was then our moon. And when I say that, I don't think the moon they migrated to is the moon that we have there now. Well, it may well be the moon we have there now, but not in the context of the moon we have there now. These people moved very close to Earth anyway, and and then interacted with development of life on this planet, so they told me. And that included the evolution of the human race, Homo sapiens, as Cro-Magnon man as we're known, I believe. Certainly, when you look at the facial structure of the older race, the Guardians or Elders, you certainly see, in my mind, a very primitive early man, and yet they're an advanced race. But if you look very deeply into their face, I don't know whether we'll get it up on the slide projector or not for you to see in detail. You have to say, yeah, well, I can see early man there. Very strange. Anyway, the object of this lesson was they needed some genetic material. They are interacting with some Earth humans that evidently have a closer tie to their primitive past interactions. Some of us seem to be more closely allied to them than others. I've been doing research now for 7 years to find out why particularly they chose me and not someone else. There's probably a small element of random probability there, and as much as it could have probably been another 100 males if they were after a male. But there are some tie-ups with blood types and genetic lineage which seem to portray, tracing back to some of the early German races actually, because I have some German blood in me, and so did this other Earth woman that I interacted with, which was abducted in 1937. She has very strong German ancestry, and I don't really know anything more about it than that at this stage. I'm still studying that aspect of it, but there seems to be some tie-up. Now, I was going someplace, obviously. They didn't describe where I was as a spaceship. I was told, however, it was a transporter, and I really still don't know whether that object physically travelled anywhere or not, or whether we were transported from one station to another. Now, you might be interested to know that that transporter was supposedly constructed in the shape of a pyramid, and they used pyramidal forces to transfer matter from A to B. And whether they actually used pyramidal spaceships as such, I'm not sure, but there are certainly a lot of triangular craft about that have been spotted over the last few years, especially since 1989. That's when there was quite a few flaps. Now, some of the interesting information from Duncan, actually, from this Alex Collier, supposes that in 1989, in March of 1989, which was the time that I was abducted, was when, if you can believe that we had a base on the moon in 1989, and that's what the material that Duncan has got suggests, that was when another alien race wiped that base out. And it was believed that one of the meetings between, I think it was the American and Russian leaders at that time, I think it was Bush and Gorbachev, I'm not quite sure if that's correct, in late March or so of 1989, was to discuss the destruction of an Earth base on Mars, and they were slightly frightened of what might be next, no doubt. If we did have a base on Mars and it had been picked off by an alien race, I guess they would be a little bit concerned as what might be next. Now, if that story is true, and I don't know if it is or not, because I don't know anything about that side of it, if anyone on this planet was having an alien interaction in February or March of 1989 and the authorities knew about it, I would think they would take an awful lot of interest in that person. And one of those people might have been me, and that could explain the problems I've been having ever since. Certainly some subversive agencies on this planet, or covert agencies on this planet, are definitely interested in abductees and their adventures. And I don't possibly think it's so much being abducted by the Greys or the Zetas. I think that they are well in cahoots with some establishments on this planet. And I think the American government already knows very much what's going on in that aspect of it. But there are many other races interacting with us on this planet, and it's those that the the other military establishments are interested in, and it's those that they're trying to keep away. I believe there's an ongoing war right out there now that is trying to prevent a lot of alien interactions on this planet, and that might be why one of the reasons that HARP has been set up. It might be really an anti-invasion ultimate weapon, I don't know. Certainly I see no malice in alien races interacting with Earth humans, because if they'd wanted to take us over, invade us, or turn us into slaves, they would have done it long before we had nuclear weapons, because they were obviously here before that. They were certainly here in the 30s, I know that for a fact. Right, we're still going okay for time. Now, I better tell you where we went before we do run out of time. Very interesting, this aspect of it, because this planet that I was taken to, funnily enough, I was told was our moon, but our moon was not up here, it was somewhere else. And this race had evidently engineered a dimensional leap, and when they'd done so, they were actually living on the moon that we had 12 or 15,000 years ago, and they took the moon with them. And they ended up in some future dimensional situation which was possibly a lot worse off than they had imagined. During this dimensional shift or leap, they had ended up in a system, whether it's our own system in a parallel time, I don't know, with a genetically decrepit sun. Put it that way, they had actually started the aging process on the sun that was supplying the energy to our moon, their moon, or the planet they were living on, and it was aging at a rate far more rapidly than it should have. And that brings us back to the reasons why they want to come back here. They can't come back here in the dimensional body that they're in, and also they've been living in very low gravity, low atmospheric pressure for thousands or possibly millions of years, and they just couldn't survive on this planet in their present body form, which is a reason why they seem to need some genetic material from various Earth peoples. Now, I'm not actually going to elaborate on what went on in that department, because it's personal and private at this stage. There's plenty of other aspects we can dwell on. Well, when they took us to the planet as such, everything that they used, or everything that they constructed materials from, was really based on the natural forces on the planet. Nothing, they didn't actually construct anything that wasn't of a natural life force. Once again, it goes back to what I saw on the ship, or the transporter, or whatever the unit was that they were transporting us around in. It appeared to be grown as like a crystalline structure without seams or joints. And when I actually saw the dwellings and the buildings on the planet, they were constructed in a similar means. It was spiral type buildings, which Callum was dwelt on here, and they seemed to use an electromagnetic grid affair, and they actually grew these half animal, half vegetable dwellings. Now, the scenario that they told me was that the electromagnetic grid held the shape of the structure together, and the animal plant mutation was allowed to grow over this electromagnetic grid until it hardened and formed a base shell, and that was what they used for their structures, for their houses. Now, as these were animal vegetable mutations, they did control the environment within the buildings, because the animal section of the building actually controlled the heating, so they didn't need any artificial heating, and there's a phosphorescent nature inside the buildings, and that provided a lot of the light. So, and you've got what you were looking at was a spiral shell construction, and some of the towers, which were many stories high, were basically just long, tall spirals. And you could see that in some way that this could have grown or formed from a natural magnetic or electromagnetic grid effect, which obviously follows some natural force of nature. That was very interesting, and I seem to recall at that point in time that brought back memories of some stuff I'd seen when I was very small. Basically the same thing, because my father was a builder, and so I was well versed in how buildings were constructed. But at 5 years of age, I remembered then at that stage that I was taken on a conducted tour through these buildings that were constructed of grown material. Here we go from there. We might, seeing we're about 3:30, try and do some slides so I can perhaps show you what the buildings look like, and then I can run into some time travel stuff that was showing me and some atomic structure material which might be of interest to some people here. If I can get them to dim the lights, and maybe we'll set up the slide projector. Now this is the sort of the hybrid Xena shot which I was telling you about. It's not a completely accurate representation, but I'll just give you an idea. The eyes are very large, the brain cavity is very big, highly intelligent, very small mouth, probably a smaller nose than that, but with some distinct ridges just up between the eyes on the nose, and you'll see the relationship of that to, if you can flip to the next slide, which is of an elder, or sorry, isn't okay? It's a bodysuit. This is similar to this. It's a glass case that the lid was capable of coming up and down, and when you stepped in it, it actually closed. And I never saw a door, so I don't know how it closed. And what we have in the back there isn't a cushion that it might appear to be. It's actually like a grid effect, and I believe that grid spun around in a circular motion when you were inside it, and then for some reason it coated your body with this sort of blue bodysuit. Okay, we'll skip to the next. Now it's probably not come up very well on there. The eyes are a little too dark and possibly a little too big in inaccurate description. But I think you might see some primitive man in that if you really look hard enough, especially around the sloping jaw. And that's as accurate a representation as I can get from memory. There's no ears at all on this guy because they don't speak, so there's no sound coming through. I don't know whether they actually have eardrums inside or not, but there's no visible ears. But then there was never any sound involved in this interaction, so it's very difficult to say whether they can physically hear or they can only mentally hear. Certainly they are dynamic. To be in the presence of one of these guys, I couldn't tell you whether they were male or female. There didn't seem to be any way to tell one from the other. And I don't know actually how they reproduce. I believe that they grow the hybrids in synthetic sort of birth chambers, but I don't know how these guys reproduce the original kind. The eyes don't show up very well there, but they're vertically elliptical, which are cat's eyes, I would say. The eye colour is very, very dark, very, very dark blue. And in the hybrid, it's actually almost violet purple. Very distinctive. I'll skip to the next one if you want. If you're in a room with one of these guys, believe me, they'll flatten you with their awesome sort of mental power. They just seem to be able to lift you up off the floor. They're very positive. I must admit, there's nothing negative about interacting with one of these guys. Very, very positive. They really give you a charge up. Excellent if you're feeling a bit down. Okay, can we skip to the next? Now here's basically a rough sort of diagram of the areas that I interacted in before we got to the planet. The lower area, 200 metres across, and it was circular. I've just compressed it to fit it in the page. And an offshoot where the bodysuit was fitted, which wasn't surrounded by the light. That's just to show you the space that it occupied. I never did get below that area, although I do believe there were access to areas below that. There might have been 10 steps down, I don't know. There's the bowling alley effect that I described to you before, where we walk down this, it's about 150 metres. You'll notice that they're getting progressively smaller as they go up, and they could be shaped in the shape of a pyramid or a point or a wedge or whatever. And this was the only area I could access. I actually tried to get into some of these doors there, but I couldn't physically pass through them. So that's the way they locked you out. They didn't need any physical locks. You just could not pass through the door in areas that you shouldn't be accessing. The sleeping area up there, that's interesting too, because I was told the longer I was with them, the less sleep I would need. And in actual fact, by the time I'd finished that 10 days, I didn't actually need to sleep any longer. They just meditated basically in a state of meditation for a couple of hours each day. That was it. That's all they needed. There's a smaller recreation room up there, and I won't get into too many details with the higher area there, because it was just like a big rec room. There was three-dimensional viewing devices up there, and actually played some interactive games, computer games if you like, in the sort of area. And then above that may have been control room, I don't know. I couldn't access that. I did ask, but I never got into there. Okay, let's go to the next. Now this is basically a rough scenario of what I would call a landing pad, because when we arrived on the planet we appeared to step out of what was a pyramid. Now I can only assume we landed in that pyramid because I got the sensations of landing. I could see down at the ground below, and I do believe that was some form of vehicle, whether that's only like a pod or a deployment from something larger, I don't know. That we did have to transfer out of one area into another when we landed, so that could just be like a landing capsule. I'm not sure. There seemed to be some sort of electromagnetic grid above the landing area. I don't know what that was for, but you could almost see the force field. You could see it twinkling. It actually made everything shimmer. These constructions here we transferred when we landed. We actually had to have the suits removed that we'd used for space flight, and we were given some other suits that were golden colour and had all sorts of different properties, I was told. I won't go into details here now because there won't be time, but they were different for different purposes. Mainly there was a lot of radiation out there. The sun was very fierce, and I believe the UV rays were probably something chronic, and I don't think 15 grade sunspot would have done the job. So we had virtually anti-radiation suits on. You notice they had all spiral towers on the top of these pyramids, and they had some glowing form of, I can only assume that they were either energy gatherers or energy dispensers. I never quite figured out what that was. This is the scale of the door area from the pyramid. And you'll notice that one of the insignias here, they have three basic countries or three groups of nationalities, and this is an insignia of the three different nationalities. The line connecting the three separate groups that have combined to form one race on this planet. Also above the door, it doesn't show up very well there, is an arrowhead type insignia, which would seem to be on the entranceway of every pyramid I went into. Seems to be an integral part of whether it's just a decoration or whether it specifically means something in detail, I really don't know. But the arrowhead and the pyramids go together. Okay, let's get to the next. These are actually made out of a glass construction actually. Now, when we got onto the home planet, I actually stayed with a group of these entities. I'll just put the same one up here again just to explain that to you. They actually live in family groups. So there's two elders, and as I say, I couldn't tell male from female if there are such a thing, and up to three hybrid, you could say hybrid children, but they were actually adults in this situation. So the family grouping seems to be two elders and three children, and these elders are really teachers as well for these hybrids. Very, very incredible people, I can assure you. They might look a bit scary there, I don't know whether it does or not, but they're very friendly, very compassionate, very loving, and the only thing I ever got from them was good vibrations, I can assure you. Next, please. Now this is, you don't really see the spiral effect on this so well. I've got a line coming through here which goes up through there and goes around through there and spirals up to the top. Within the construction is a sort of a hexagonal crystal gauze sort of effect that you can almost see through. The startling thing about the houses is most of them didn't seem to have any windows. but they were computer-driven, if you could call that, from your own mind. And if you stared at the wall long enough, the house got the idea you wanted to see outside, and you could see through the wall. Okay, next please. There's various sizes of these. Now, when I was explaining to you that, I don't know how well you can see that, this is one side here's a skeletal structure of chlorophyll, and the other is a skeletal structure of blood hemoglobin. And as you can see, the actual the layout of both is identical, except that with the chlorophyll you've got a magnesium central core, and with the blood hemoglobin you've got an iron core. But if you swap those or took out the central core, you can see that both constructions overlap. So constructing a house from an animal and vegetable mix, I don't think would be very difficult if you were as advanced as these people were. In fact, it's even been reported that both these sequences may have a common ancestor. And that was said by someone with a few more brains than me. Okay, next. This is a smaller version of another dwelling. They seem to be able to make them any size they want, depending on what they wanted to use them for. But all of these smaller constructions were really only just personal houses. They had enormous buildings, and we'll skip to the next one if you like. This is one structure. There's human scale to the side here, but really, to be honest, you would be smaller than that, probably half that size. These drawings were done by my stepson, and these illustrations hopefully will be in a book that Duncan's going to put together for us on this adventure. So they're not my drawings, but if you've seen how I draw, you'd rather be looking at these, I can assure you. They're immensely tall towers, and most of the buildings, including the pyramids, have that spiral, what I could call only a sort of an aerial or gathering device on the top, highly luminous. It shone in day or night, and I still don't really remember whether it was gathering energy or dispensing it. Okay, and the construction underneath was of similar. I believe it went down in a wedge shape into the ground, because I went down into a couple of labs below ground, and they seem to go down very deep. So I'd say it's sort of like a mirror imaging under the ground. Okay, next. Just another spiral tower, but there again, I think, as you were watching Cullum's lecture earlier this morning, there's nature at its best. These people use nature's power to construct their buildings for them, and there's a spiral structure. I can't explain it any more than they just use nature's forces to do their work for them. They don't fight it. They just convert it. Seems to be the way to go. Next. This is what they call a primitive means of transport. They actually used some sort of transportation system on the planet which just zapped you from one place to another. But there were some outback areas, call them outback areas, that didn't have stations that you could be teleported to. I'll use the word teleportation. So they did have a device which would in its closest relationship be called a car. Now, they don't have wheels. There seemed to be some sort of magnetic repulsion that they used to support it off the ground. The roads they used, I'm sure, had some sort of metallic reaction or magnetic reaction material in it. And this craft just hovered there. And I'll tell you what the motive power of the car was to drive it forward was mind power. That's what they told me anyway. There's no motor in that. It just operates by sheer will. And of course there's no friction because it's just supported on a cushion of air. Now over the small corner here, my stepson suggested that he put a brand on it because he didn't know whether it was a Ford or a Chrysler. That's actually their national insignia. In fact, if they ever visit this planet and you see a spacecraft with that insignia on, you'll know exactly where they've come from. It's just a triangle inside of a half-completed or three-quarter completed circle. And it's got a little story to it. That is actually their insignia for 12. The numerical system, which runs in groups of 12, which might seem vaguely familiar to some of you that are as old as I am. Imperial system of 12 pennies, etc. When it's the figure 12, though, the circle is split on the side. That's the only difference. From the national insignia, the circle is split at the head of the pyramid, and for the figure 12, they turn it slightly on its side, and it's just the only difference. The reason that 12 and the national emblem are similar is because it virtually represents their progress. They are very proud of their dimensional travel capabilities, and the pyramid evidently is one of their major feats of construction. It's some form of crystal pulsation system that they use to take themselves from one area of the universe or solar system to another. And the half or three-quarter completed cycle is actually their inability to complete their dimensional shift in a full cycle, which is what they intended to do when they had genetic experiments on their own dimensionality. They never quite made it to the dimension that they were supposed to go to, which was maybe 4 or 5 if you were going to call dimensions by number. They're now stuck in that cycle and they can't get out. They can't progress forward at all. They've been in this system for possibly millions of years, and they're not evolving. And of course now with their planet, with their sun dying on them, that's why they're coming back to us. And they're actually progressing back to a third dimensional reality. For the very most important reason, I believe, they know that the people of this planet are going to evolve to a fourth or fifth dimension very soon. They want to come back to third dimensional reality and take that bus ride with us when we go forth, so they get to where they intended to go many millions of years ago and stuffed it up. Okay, next. Now, they did describe basically what time travel was all about, and they were very succinct in describing to me that there is no physical matter in the universe that is solid. Everything is constructed of wave and vibrational or resonance patterns, and the more dense the resonancy pattern, the more solid the object, or the more dense the object. And the same is true for time. Time is just a frequency wave. And evidently what they were suggesting to me was that because we are inherently tuned to the pulse of our time, or our solar system, or our universe, we can't time travel in physical capabilities unless we alter our resonancy or our life pulse. And the way they have done that is by virtually inserting themselves in a huge crystal, and you could call that crystal a pyramid, and therefore altering the life frequency or their resonance, their life resonance. Once they get this resonance out of sync with time, as we've shown here, you can actually slip through time. The time resonance is the only thing that holds us in place, according to them. So once you've altered your own personal time frequency or pulse, then you can travel through time, past or future, depending on how you tune the crystal that you may be inserted in or may be using as a tool. Okay, next. Now, that's just basically what I've put there, is that if you had a crystal of a size, say in the shape of a pyramid, pulsed it up, as you know, that quartz crystals are used as a time mechanism or timing on modern watches, because crystals do pulse and do resonate if they're injected with an electrical charge. I believe that the pyramids or time travel devices they use are just really a large crystal which is pulsed up and used to break through that resonance barrier and therefore take you wherever you want to go once you've got capacity to tune that to a desired destination. And they also suggested to me that there are some time overlaps occurring in nature because of the waveform of time. If you're living present day and the wave sequences get slightly out of whack, which could be done through other people manipulating them or natural resonances in the universe, perhaps planets getting too close together or suns sort of erupting in supernovas and sending out waveforms through the universe time can get squeezed up, pushed out of phase, and you can get time overlap. So it's quite possible that even in present day time you could be standing in a place and get a vision of the past or the future, and they tried to describe to me that might be the system that is causing that to happen. So you don't necessarily need technology, you just have to be in the right place at the right time. Okay, that's the last of the slides, I think, so if we can have the lights back on. I'm not sure what we're going for time. I think we're just about out now, so I was going to do some matter construction for you, but we'll skip that, I think, and just run in some questions. If anybody would like to ask me. Okay, you're asking the subversive government agencies why they particularly wanted to ask me some questions.
Well, what specifically did
I can't exactly tell you that because I never cooperated with them. They wanted to debrief me on where I'd been, and they wanted to know all about the people I'd interacted with. Evidently, I believe they'd come across these people in time travel experiments of their own, and they were quite keen to find out what I knew, I believe. But as I never cooperated and never went to any debriefings and refused to cooperate with them, I have never actually faced them, if you like.
What was the problem with coming from New Zealand to here? Are you being harassed now? And what's your reluctance to talk to us?
You're asking why I had trouble coming here, and my reluctance to talk to who?
Is it just your shyness, is it?
Well, I thought I'd just told you an incredible story. I don't know what else I could tell you. I'm already running out of time.
No. Your reluctance to come from New Zealand to come here and
talk
to us, what was your concern?
Okay, there was no reluctance on my behalf, but the authorities didn't want to let me out of New Zealand. Duncan had to go to a little bit of work to try and get a visa. I need a visa. I've skipped a very important part of the scenario because I just haven't got the time. They actually put me in jail because I would not cooperate with them. They set me up, framed me and sent me to jail, and that's slowed me down for the last couple of years, and that's why I haven't been able to communicate, and that's why this has taken 7 years. Sorry I left that little bit out. Okay. Yes, I just haven't had the time.
And you've done very well. So I wouldn't be concerned at all. I was, you performed excellent.
Thank you.
Why did you actually come back to this world? Was it better here or?
He's asking me why I came back. Actually, I scratched my head over that one myself a couple of times, especially the last couple of years. No, I think there's a job for me to do, and I think the interaction, they did give me the opportunity. I did not have to come back, to be honest with you. I feel that I've got more to offer here than there. They don't really need me, if you know what I mean. Gentlemen, what
can you tell us about the 9-year-old lady, please? What's she into?
Well, I have... don't know how to put this. She asked me not to reveal her identity. She's fairly well known. She prefers the past to be the past and for people to think what happened and to leave it at that. I really can't go into that. That would be a betrayal of a promise. Sorry. Okay. Gentlemen?
Were these people just kind of crystal techno freaks, or did they have a religious, spiritual perspective on things as well that you were aware of?
I really don't know whether I could answer that. I was only sort of... The only thing I can suggest to you is that they come from a loving place and a caring place, and they didn't force me to do anything that I didn't wish to do, and they were only too concerned with my well-being. They were actually as curious about it the way we live as what I was about them. So I really can't, give you details. Yes, sir.
Are you still in contact with them? I mean, over that period of time, have you, is there still a connection established there, or are you able to communicate with them?
He's asking me if they're still connecting or contacting me, and I think we'll just leave that at the moment, please, because I'm having enough problems as it is.
Come back to the planet, and how do they expect to interact with people on this planet and to live amongst us with the type of technology and the way they're seeing things, which is so different from the way human beings.
The lady's asking what or how they intend to come back and when they intend to come back and what they would do when they got here. I can't obviously answer the last question because I had no idea what they would do when they got here. They did suggest to me that they would be back within my lifetime, and if you read the material that's going to be coming up in Nexus in the next few months, I think that will give you a pretty good idea of the time schedule. I wasn't given a time schedule except within my lifetime, which could be any time from now for the next 30 years perhaps. Yes sir, in a way.
Was there any body experimentation done on you by these entities?
Nothing, sorry, he's asking if they did any physical experimentation on me. I did give her some body fluids. There was no major intrusion into my body. There was no surgery, there was none of that stuff, and everything was very, very, put it this way, compatible with my wishes. They gave me options. Yes sir, in the check.
They look very similar to the Greys, and the Greys don't have too good a reputation on the planet. I was just wondering how they intend to interact with this planet while they still have sort of interaction between the Greys and US military department.
He's asking me that these aliens look very similar to the Greys and what they might do when they get here. Well, have you seen a Grey? Okay, well, the question is difficult to answer because neither have I. And I don't know what the Greys really look like. There's as much disinformation out there as information. I would suggest that you be careful about where you get that information from.
What colour was their skin anyway? We don't even know what colour their skin was.
Sorry, the gentleman's asking what colour their skin was. More blue than this, but a blue-grey, but definitely succinctly blue. You wouldn't miss him if you met him in the street, I can assure you. Yes, sir.
Isn't it be like another race working with the government, but in a negative way?
The gentleman's asking if there's another race working with the government in a negative way. Well, that would possibly, if you believe what you read, that would be the Greys. And these people are about as far from that, I would imagine, as you could get. They do not interact with other alien intelligences unless they absolutely have to, as that's what they told me. They're not particularly happy with what's going on this planet. But as I do not know what other races are doing or even what they look like, I really am not qualified.
The reason I ask is because my father's a medium, and with their sanctuary, they've been told by the people working with the government and what they're doing. With ours, without us knowing about it, it's really bad. And I just thought, you coming down here, I thought you'd be telling us more about what they're doing.
Okay, you're asking me what the alien intelligence are doing on this planet. Well, really, if I'm talking about alien intelligences outside of the ones I've had my immediate contact with, once again, I don't know any more than you do. I can read and simulate information and make my own judgment calls, but that's all I'd be giving you. It wouldn't be anything I learned from other sources, so it wouldn't be any more valid than your own opinions. Yes, sir, the yellow.
I was wondering if they told you anything about their evolutionary path and why they stopped evolving and why they needed to come back to third dimensional reality in order to ascend to higher dimensional reality.
Okay, he's asking me if they explained to me, well, the evolutionary process basically and why they've stuck. They did, but I would need another 3 hours to explain it in detail. But basically, they played God with their own genetics. They really destroyed the evolutionary path by going off on a side shoot which doesn't seem to have an exit.
Is that like an externalization of traveling through dimensions rather than it coming from developing your subtle body vehicles? It's using external means to travel through dimensional realities rather than subtle body structures that we may have in our energy system.
Okay, he's just asking for more details on the genetic evolutionary path, basically. Well, they forced it physically, yes. Technically, they tried to force what you would call a God concept of evolution, not that I believe in evolution, but in a technical way, and they really have stuck themselves in a muddy patch. The thing is that in the dimension that they're in now, there are no planets that exist in nature in that dimension. So therefore they can't actually live on a planet in what we would call dimension 3.5. If you consider that we're third dimension and maybe the next one up is 4, they're at 3.5, which gives them, the reason they played with dimensional evolution was it gives them more freedom in time travel. It's evidently very difficult for third dimension beings to travel in time beyond your lifespan. That's what they conveyed to me. Yes, sir.
2 questions. One, what is your profession? And 2, your recollection of these events, is it as tangible as us here and now?
Okay, he's asking my previous profession, of which I've had several, and was the interaction as real as standing here? Only as, well, I'll ask the second question first. The reality of it is no more than a memory of anything you've ever done in your life. A trip away, friends that you might have used to know that have passed on that you couldn't physically see now, but you've only got a memory of them. I can't go back physically and touch them again because it's history now and it's only memory. So there's no way I can explain it any better than that. And what was your first part of the question again?
What is your profession prior to?
Okay, and my profession prior to that, well, my very first profession was a sailmaker actually, closely associated with nature you might say. From then I progressed through various jobs. I was a car dealer for a while actually, hence my knowledge of mechanics. And I've done several jobs. I've been in retail, store retailing and so forth, but the last 7 years I've actually been living this nightmare. I haven't had a job for 7 years. I can't work now. I'm out of the system, and that's by choice. I don't choose to go to work from 9 till 5.
One more question. How long were you in jail for?
He's asking me how long I was in jail. I was actually sentenced to 12 months, and you just do 6. You do half of it in New Zealand for non-violent crimes and that. Yes, sir, next to you.
How many of them are there that plan to come back to our planet? Is it like millions or?
Well, he's asking me how many of the aliens there are. It was suggested to me that the total population of that planet was 15 million. Now that doesn't mean that 15 million of them are going to come here because obviously they're going to have to genetically alter themselves to get here. So how many they genetically alter to come here would be how many come here, but I wasn't privileged to that information, sorry.
Why couldn't they just incarnate into our planet?
What makes you think they already haven't?
Yes, I think they probably have.
Yeah, well, she's asking if they've incarnated into this planet. They possibly have, but I think they need to physically bring themselves forward also, and you would have to ask them why.
Does it give an explanation of how mankind is not the fourth dimension and what time is that?
He's asking if they gave an explanation of how mankind would move into the next dimension. They didn't really, except that they told me to expect it imminently. But once again, no time scale. I don't think they want me to live a life of knowing when things are going to occur, because that tends to, I think, muck things up. And I don't think they wanted to ruin my life completely. I have to live it like you do without the certainty of any particular pieces of knowledge. Sorry. Yes, sir?
Have you managed to answer your own question, why me?
He's asking why me. Well, as I explained a little bit earlier on, I think genetically they have a very narrow band of descendants to pick from. I'm not saying I'm one of them, but by tracing back blood groups and lineage, and if you want a healthy, like I really have had an extraordinarily healthy life. I've never had any sickness, and I've reasonably rare blood group, like if you count only males, about 7% of the population. So then if you count healthy males of a reasonable age, maybe only 2% of the population. And then there may be other things that I'm not sure of that fit into that equation. So maybe there's only a few, like probably 1% of the planet that they can pick from, if that means anything. One more question. Yes, sir?
Yeah, the fact that this woman from 1937 didn't seem to age would suggest that they've managed to reverse the aging process. So in that case, why would they need to reproduce, and why would they need genes from somewhere else if they're going to live forever?
He's asking why, if the lady didn't age in 40 or 50 years, why they would need to reproduce. Well, our lifespan of 80 years is pretty small. I think it's pretty commonly accepted that a lot of alien lifespans are 1,000 years, 700 years, 1,500 years. So therefore a 50-year span of this woman not aging wouldn't mean that she's not going to die, but she might live for 300 or 400 years. But they would still have to reproduce in the end. Okay, that's all. Thanks very much. There's just two things I want to clarify. Alec referred several times to material which I had recently supplied him. I should probably clarify that. In the last few weeks, our office came into possession of some written material which is circulating around America at the moment and starting to appear on parts of the internet, and I'm sure you'll see it surfacing in Australia. There's a gentleman in the States called Alec Collier, and he claims to have been regularly abducted by Andromedans, and he has a very interesting story. What intrigued me about it, and which is why I forwarded the papers in its entirety to Alec Newald in New Zealand, is that the information the Andromedans gave the other Alec in America dovetailed incredibly with the material that Alec had supplied me. I'm a bit more in a privileged information. I've actually received a copy of Alec's manuscript, which Nexus will one day be publishing in the near future. So I've had the chance to read a lot of the details which he's been unable to share with you today. And I've got to say, all the years I've been doing stuff at Nexus magazine, it's a very, very interesting perspective. Similarly with this Andromedan perspective, and we've put part one of the paperwork in the current issue of Nexus, which is just about to go on sale in the newsagent in the next few days. If you're a subscriber, incidentally, and you see the latest issue out there, don't despair. It is in the post to you. But there is one facet which I'll just take a minute to add here. The overall nutshell of the Andromedan perspective is this. The Andromedans who contacted the other Alec, they also indicate the Earth is about to go through a dimensional shift at a time of great cataclysms and earth changes, etc., which they seem to indicate we're beginning at the moment. Now what intrigues me, and I'm sure anyone who's read the Philadelphia experiment, the Montauk project, is that in a nutshell what the Andromedans are telling this other Alec is that in one of our probable futures there exists a reality that is literally a totalitarian government-run system. Everybody is literally a non-person. You're just a consumer or a producer. It's very unpleasant. People are treated more like numbers and blobs of flesh rather than sort of unique spiritual beings. The Andromedans claim that they have come from the future back to this era of the past with the sole intention of interfering with history at this point in time so that probable future doesn't emerge. It's a fascinating concept, and there's a lot of material to back it up. There's a lot of peripheral material, and I'm sure you'll see it circulating in some of the UFO magazines and groups that are out there, and we've started to put a bit of it in Nexus magazine, so keep an eye out for that. And when you read Alec's book and you read Alec Collier's material, you'll see an incredible dovetail of this information from two totally different continents. And I've got to say, it should be in a great science fiction movie just in terms of the concept, but it certainly leads you to believe that we live in exciting times. So on that note, I'll leave you all for our coffee break. We'll fix our slide projector and see you in half an hour. Thank you.